Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ask Kati Anything. I'm your host, licensed marriage and family therapist, Kati Morton. I'm so glad that you're here. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about whether or not we can know so much about a mental illness and its symptoms that we begin to mimic the symptoms ourselves, meaning we kind of pretend or make up our mental illness. Can we do that? Then I'm going to explore whether or not our past therapeutic experiences will affect our current or our future ones. I'll talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to get into why our depression can be worse in the summer and the differences between shame, guilt, and embarrassment. Finally, I'll dig into what we can do if we find ourselves being a really difficult patient and what inner child work can really look like. Now, if you are looking to get more questions answered or you want more communication or interaction with our community, you can join me over on my Patreon page. You can go to patreon.com/Kati Morton. I also offer it through YouTube memberships. I have live streams 4 times a week, depending on your tier. If you're in the Psyched Up 30 or Psyched Up 60 tiers, I offer live streams each and every month. So you can head over there and check that out as well. Without further ado, let's jump right into this question. This question says, Kati, happy whatever day of the week you're actually reading this. As a kid, I'm actually reading this on a Monday, so happy Monday. As a kid, I read all the mental health books at the library. And as an adult, all the websites/research papers that I can find to try to understand what's quote unquote wrong with me. I never really sought professional help until a few years ago after a longer than usual depressive episode. My question is this: is it possible that I may have read so much into that by the time I had my assessment with a psychiatrist that I was reciting or relating what I've read and what I think I have through self-diagnosis, and incorrectly relating to symptoms I may not actually be experiencing, or perhaps I am experiencing those symptoms but have exaggerated the extent that I am experiencing them. Because I never really learned how to communicate my thoughts and emotions, most of what I've learned I picked up as an adult through observations, and sometimes I wonder if I'm doing it right or if they're really my experiences and thoughts. Not sure if that makes any sense, but as always, thanks for any insight you can give me. Of course, happy to help. Now, this is a great question and one that a lot of people have. Can I know so much about something that I start thinking that I have it, or exaggerating some of the symptoms that I do in fact have? And the truth about this is that any good assessment or test or any good mental health professional will throw in a couple red herrings or a couple questions that will show us whether or not you're lying. I don't know if any of you know that, but when you take some of those, like the MMPI, or you take other testing and assessment, there are questions that are placed into those questionnaires that will tell us if you're lying or if, we're on the wrong path. We already account for that. Also, so that's one big piece that I don't think we've talked about enough, is that almost every testing assessment, almost every clinician will ask some questions just to see if maybe we are lying or making it up or exaggerating even, okay? So those questions will rule that out. But the real meat of my answer here has more to do with the fact that you felt so bad that you reached out for help. You said you had a longer than usual depressive episode. Something was happening, because I don't know anyone in this entire world who on their own time would want to feel terribly and would perpetuate that themselves. Now, I know we can get into like the nuances of but I'm sometimes doing things that aren't helpful for me. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you creating depression in yourself. There are always times in your life when you are either home alone or you're getting ready for bed and you feel this depression and you don't tell anybody about it. It doesn't benefit you and you feel like shit. And I don't know anybody who wants to create that. Therefore, I always firmly believe that we would never make up our mental illness or exaggerate its effects when we aren't telling anyone else about it, when it's just our life and we're just living it, feeling terrible. So take that into consideration, okay? Because I don't believe you're doing any of that. And that's why. That's the biggest thought that I have or belief I have about this, okay? Now, can we read so much about something that we can say or communicate thoughts and feelings in a way that can feel inauthentic? You betcha. because you never learned how to do it, you might use terminology that you read because you understand that to be the way it's spoken about. It'd be like learning how to talk to someone about painting a home. If you just watched a professional do it on YouTube and they use these certain terminology and you didn't know about that terminology, like running a tight line or something, you would use that term, you'd say, because that's all you know. And that doesn't make it any less true or any less authentic. It just gives you, it's kind of what I create online, is to help give you the language to empower you to then communicate that with your mental health professionals and get the support that you so desperately need, right? So those are really my thoughts. Self-diagnosis is helpful and it has a place in our treatment plan, I do strongly believe, because you are the expert of your experience. I am the expert of mental health conditions and mental illnesses and its treatment. Without knowing exactly what's going on with you, I can't help you, right? And so it's with your expertise and mine together. Remember my old saying that with your experience and my expertise, we work together towards a healthy mind and a healthy body. That's the truth. So you understanding stuff, you considering what you would diagnose yourself with is all helpful information. I feel like as clinicians, we shouldn't shy away from that. I don't know if people feel maybe like it's competitive or like it's undermining their degree or their licensure. I personally don't feel that way. I think it's helpful because, again, you know you best, and I want to utilize that. Why not? And so those are really all of my thoughts. You are doing this the correct way. You are being resourceful. You are reading everything about it. And it's with all of that knowledge and understanding that then you pair it up with a mental health professional to ensure that the diagnosis or the treatment that is working, that is being applied to you, is actually beneficial and is true with the diagnosis you have. Does that make sense? It's almost like a self-diagnosis isn't 100% correct by any stretch of the imagination. Neither is a therapist diagnosis, right? We're not 100% right all the time. That'd be wild, right? But we can together ensure that you are getting properly diagnosed and treated, okay? And there was an add-on to this that says, without actual lab tests and such to confirm when therapists and psychiatrists ask how we are doing or if a medication is helping, how do we really know? I'm always frustrated by the fact that I have to assess subjectively, and I'm never sure if I can trust myself in my own assessment. When I'm depressed, I read a lot of books or blogs to try to find something I can relate to, but I also worry that it will taint my subjective assessment or that I make things bigger than they truly are. My psychiatrist talks about the ability to function, etc., but I feel like I'm high functioning to begin with, even though I may have a worsening storm inside. This is a wonderful comment and add-on. Now, when someone asks if a medication is really helping, the best thing we can do for ourselves is start tracking our symptoms. Now, there's a great app. There's probably better apps out there, but the two that I know of, one is eMoods, so the letter E, Moods. Another, bizarrely enough, is the Clue app, which is actually a period tracking app, but in that it has a way to track our emotional response, our symptoms. Are we feeling more depressed? Are we more lethargic? Do we have body aches? It helps us track how we're doing and how we're feeling. And so I'm sure there are other ones out there. Feel free to leave them in the comments. I know on the live stream on YouTube memberships last month, people had a lot of other ideas. Add those in there, but find some way to track your symptoms, because when a therapist or psychiatrist asks if a medication is working or how you're feeling, if you feel like you're getting better, that's what we mean. Do the symptoms that bother you the most, let's say your most bothersome symptom is I can't concentrate and I don't sleep well, have those things improved? That's what we're asking. And I know you can feel like you can't trust your own assessment, but that can give you actual like numerical values or like ticks on the number of days that it affects you. It will give you an actual thing to look at tangibly and to be like, am I getting better or not? But I also want you to know that your subjective assessment is valuable, again, because it's your experience and our expertise. It's not that we aren't going to trust your judgment, but we're going to ask follow-up questions to ensure we're fully understanding what you're going through. And so together we can make sure that what you're actually experiencing and your level of functioning is communicated. Now, ability to function is something that we're always going to bring up as mental health professionals because it's a piece of all the diagnostic criteria. Can we function at school or work, in our social life, and our hygiene, things like that, like basic self-care? Can we do those things? And we're going to check in on that because it's part of what we were taught, frankly. Now, we can be really high functioning. There's nothing wrong with saying, I am functioning fine, but I feel like I'm barely hanging on. I feel like that's still important to communicate, that we do feel okay. We can go to work and do work. When we get home, we're like, ugh. Just communicate that, because that's all part of your functioning. Even if you're high functioning in a situation with your depression, you're still able to make it to work and you go out with your friends every so often, you can say, but it feels so much more laborious than it did before. And then I'm exhausted after. That's valuable. That doesn't mean that you're not struggling. Okay. Don't think that functioning is the only way we rate it. It's not. And don't think that you can't communicate kind of the difficulties you're experiencing, because again, it goes back to the symptoms that were bothering you most. Do we feel like those are gone? Do we feel like those are still there? Do we feel like they're getting worse, etc.? Okay. Let's move on to question number 2. This question is, hi, Kati, happy Thursday. Happy Thursday. Says, can therapeutic experiences have an effect on past therapeutic experiences have an effect on our current therapy? You betcha. A few years ago, my college referred me for counseling at the college after I disclosed something to them. I completely freaked out after hearing that someone from my past was possibly at campus. And I told my mentor about what happened because he was going to be there and I would feel too unsafe to attend. Long story short, he had visited from a different campus but was not attending full-time, thankfully. When I attended the first session, the therapist was very direct, wanting me to start explaining what happened to me almost straight away. That's not appropriate. Super awkward. Yeah. As I was explaining, she kept stopping me to ask the same question again and again. I was at a party and I felt like I needed some fresh air. He followed me and then she cut me off, asking, "He raped you?" What? This is not therapeutic. I answered no and I tried to continue. I felt like he was in my personal space, standing just too close, so I told him to back off, and then the same thing happened. She cut me off with the same question. I started to feel very uncomfortable. Stopped. And she prompted me to carry on. When I eventually told her the events that happened that night, ending with, I thought he was going to, but he let go of me. I just bolted it and ran off and left. She said, so he didn't. I knew what she was going to ask, so I cut her off, shaking my head. And then she said, so that's all that happened? Oh, okay, we'll get into this. Almost like it wasn't a big deal. I felt so embarrassed. I felt like I was totally overreacting. I only attended a further 2 sessions, which were pretty much the same, and it felt like I was just too sensitive and was wasting her time, so I left. No, she was wasting your time. She's not good at her job, but we'll get into that. I recently started therapy again years later and did a doorknob confession about what happened, leaving out the experience with the previous therapist. I dreaded my next session, worried she would think I was overreacting, but her response confused me too. She genuinely seemed to care about what happened and seemed to acknowledge that she could see it was difficult for me to talk about. Yes, because she's a good therapist. As we spoke about it more, I kept saying how I felt so stupid for letting it happen and how I believed I was overreacting, etc., etc. And she asked, you do understand that was a crime, don't you? I guess logically, yes, but I do. But part of me is still arguing that I overreacted. Okay. Unfortunately, just like any job, some therapists are great at their job and amazing and can be life-changing, and some are terrible at their jobs and can be completely harmful, detrimental, and possibly re-traumatizing. And unfortunately, you ran into one that was very, very terrible, frankly, shitty and embarrassingly bad at her job. I don't know where she went to school. I don't know how she thought that would be helpful. I don't know what was going on with her, but the way that she interacted with you was completely unethical and inappropriate. And technically, you could file a claim against her license if you so desire. You have that right. Once someone has taken you on as their patient, we can file complaints against them because that's not appropriate. That was super harmful. And to say to use the R word in a first session, to cut a patient off, to say I've talked about this in the past, but as therapists, we're acutely aware, or should be, I should say, not all of us, but the good ones, the ones who try their best, are acutely aware of the language used. We don't say things like, oh, you only did that, or that only happened, or that just happened to you. Or, so let me get this straight, that was all you experienced, those are very judgmental terms. I'm sure there's others. Those are just the three that I know personally I'm acutely aware of, and do not use them unless I know they're done in a way that is helpful and healing, because it can be so minimizing. And therapy is a place for you to feel seen, heard, and validated, not for you to feel judged and invalidated. That's not therapeutic. So that therapist was really shitty at their job. And I'm so sorry that you had to even spend a minute in their presence. I'm glad you have someone that is better. That sounds like things will now move forward as you get that support that you needed, as you get that validation that you so desperately require so that you can heal. And I'm so sorry that happened to you. I'm so sorry that you were traumatized. You were assaulted. You feared for your safety. That is a terrible place to be in. And shame on that person for acting in those ways. And I don't know how long ago it happened, but if you so desire, feel free to press charges, because what happened to you was a crime. Okay? So all to sum up, because your question is really about past therapeutic experiences affecting current, and 100% they can. Just like our past relationships, like romantic relationships, can affect our current romantic relationships, because we take that baggage in if we haven't had an opportunity to process it. But the beautiful thing about therapy is we can take our time in our current therapy to talk through and process the bad experience, right? We can use this as an opportunity for us to heal from it and move forward and recognize and accept slowly over time that what happened to us was a crime, and the way the first therapist treated us was unethical and inappropriate. And we can come to that conclusion slowly but surely. But if you feel okay to do it, I would encourage you to tell your current therapist about this past experience, okay? Okay. Let's move on to question number 3. This question says, "Hi, Katie. You mentioned in a few podcasts that depressive symptoms tend to get worse in the summer." They do. I would like to hear your thoughts about what is the reason for it. In my experience, it's a mix of sensitivity to the sunlight and heat, dissonance between my internal feelings and the outside world, and social pressure to be active and happy. Thank you. It's all those things. Let's talk about it. Now, we talk about seasonal affective disorder, and we often think that, it's funny that it's called SAD. We always assume that SAD occurs only in the winter months because it's dark out, we don't get as much sun on our skin, our serotonin levels are low, and we are tired and feel a little bit more depressed than normal, or a lot more depressed, depending on how you experience it. However, for a large swath, and I forget the actual statistics, but let's say like 40% of people or 30% experience seasonal affective disorder in the summer, what they call a reverse presentation. So instead of it happening in the winter, it happens in the summer. But I even have people where it happens in both. But that is getting more into kind of what I would call major depressive disorder, depending on the length and severity. Okay. All that being said, the reasons that it can happen in the summer are, number one, for a lot of my patients, and somebody mentioned something like this in the comments, I believe, that they don't like to feel so seen. And if we have self-injury scars, or we have body dysmorphia, or any kind of body image issues, the heat can make it really uncomfortable for us to be out in it. And we can feel like we have to show off more of our body, which can be uncomfortable. And we can get questions about it or comments on it. And that visibility that we can feel in the summertime can be incredibly uncomfortable. Okay. So that's part of it. Then the sensitivity to sunlight and the heat. I don't think we talk enough about that. I'm so glad you brought that up, because for a lot of us, heat can be incredibly uncomfortable and even detrimental. And if we have a chronic illness, we could be more predisposed to overheat. I have a good friend, my good friend Mare has MS, and she is not supposed to get overheated. She's like, I live in Houston. What am I supposed to do in the summer? And it makes it really difficult for her, and it's really uncomfortable, and it's really bad for her health. So she feels kind of trapped in this. Of course, that's going to affect our mood, right? So that sensitivity to sunlight and heat, let's say we sunburn really easily. I'm super allergic to mosquitoes here for whatever reason. Like I have like 3 welts currently happening on my body at this moment. And so I don't want to be outside right now because the discomfort that I experienced lasts for 2 weeks, and it welts and it looks terrible. And it makes it really hard, and I don't like it. So I want to stay inside. And if we stay inside, the reason I'm bringing this kind of full circle, if we stay inside, we aren't really getting the sunlight that maybe we'd get in the winter, because the sun might still be out, but we're comfortable out there in it. Does that make sense? And so even though there is more sun, that doesn't mean that we're getting it if we don't want to be out in it. And I think that is really the key that ties us all together. But also, you mentioned the dissonance between your internal feelings and the outside world, and like this pressure to be active and happy. Sometimes when we're expected, or when the world feels like it's opening up, everybody's excited and we don't feel that way. That discrepancy between what we feel like everyone else is experiencing and our experience can make us feel worse. It can make us feel like our normal everyday, like day-to-day feelings, which maybe in the wintertime we're like, nobody's doing anything. That's fine. We hibernate. It's cold. It's snowy. We don't want to be out. We don't feel so different. We feel more like the same as people. And I will tell you, we've talked about this a lot on my channel, is that feeling alone in our experience, like we're somehow different or weird or opposite of what everybody else, that it like exacerbates our already existing depressive symptoms. And so I think that is a piece of it as well. But those are just my thoughts. That's what I know about it. And so some of the same things, if you find yourself hibernating inside, if you can at least look out the window and get the sun on your face, or stand out in it if you can for 15 minutes first thing in the morning, maybe before it gets too hot, get that sun on your face. That can help produce serotonin. We can get those sun lamps and things like that as well. And also, I think, making ourselves as comfortable as possible, talking about it, and potentially considering medication or therapy during this time, because we know if we have like a cycle of it and we know every summer this is going to happen, maybe we should start therapy in May so that we get a little extra support to get us through until September or something like that. Just some things to consider, okay? But know that you're not alone. Like I said, it's a huge swath of people. I should have looked up the statistic before I filmed this, but unfortunately I did not. But you're not alone. A lot of people feel this way, okay? Moving on to question number 4, it says, "Hi, Kati, can you discuss the difference between shame, guilt, and embarrassment?" Gladly. "I had a traumatic childhood, and I do know and believe things weren't my fault. I don't have shame in the sense of the belief that something is or was wrong with me. However, the idea of someone knowing about my history makes me feel ashamed or embarrassed. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks again for giving yourself to help others." Of course, it's such a privilege to do what I do. Let's quickly define them. Shame is something's wrong with me. I'm broken. Okay? Something's inherently wrong with me. I am bad. That's shame. Guilt is I did something wrong, right? We think of guilt in a court of law. If you're found guilty, that means you did something wrong. There can be misplaced guilt. It does not mean we did something wrong, but that's the experience, okay? Embarrassment is when we don't like that we did something, we don't want to tell anyone about it, and we think that it reflects poorly on us. So it could be like ego dystonic. It like goes against, doesn't feel good. It goes against who we believe that we are. So that cognitive dissonance of like, but I think I'm this person, but I did that. That can all feed into embarrassment. And embarrassment and shame can kind of run together really closely. And I'm sure you could kind of see that, where if we don't like something that we did, we can think that then therefore something is wrong with us, right? And they can kind of feed into one another, but they are also very different, okay? Those are the definitions. Now, the person who asked this question, it sounds like you don't have the shame in thinking that something's wrong with you. However, the history of what you've been through causes you to have a lot of embarrassment. And I think that embarrassment is almost pushing into a little bit of that shame, because you said you feel ashamed. So if we talk about our history and our experiences, we think that almost shows people, this might be more like external, like it shows other people, and they might think something's wrong with us, or they might think poorly of us. Hence, I think the embarrassment and shame is really where it's at for you. But I would put a little more emphasis on the embarrassment. And that's why I always talk about trauma and how shame, guilt, and embarrassment show up and like feed into one another. And that keeps us quiet. And that stops us from talking about it. And it makes us feel worse about who we are and what we're about and where we've come from. And that, I believe, is what perpetuates that PTSD-like response and, keeps us feeling bad for a longer amount of time. And so my encouragement for you is start talking about your history with people that you trust, little by little. Not like verbal diarrhea, tell them everything, but what I can assure you, and I know as a therapist, I don't assure a lot of things, but research and my experience tells me time and time again that when we select people that are trustworthy and loving and caring and supportive of us, so I have to be very careful about who we share this with. But when we do that, we slowly prove to ourselves that there was nothing to be embarrassed or ashamed about in the first place. We can feel more empowered. We feel like we can take up space. We start to feel better. And our PTSD symptoms lessen ever so slightly. And the more we share it and the more we talk about it, the better we will feel. Will it feel terrible up front? 100%. Will we have like that vulnerability hangover where we're like, shit, I shouldn't have told them about this. Oh my God, they're going to judge me. Oh, the relation. Yes, we probably will. But I will tell you that as you continue to do this and you keep pushing and keep, unfortunately, sitting in that discomfort instead of running away from it, we will start to feel ourselves get better. Our world will get larger. We will feel more assured in who we are and almost get this kind of like feeling of like, my past doesn't define me. That happened to me. It's not about me. You know, we can kind of change the narrative that we tell ourselves about where we've come from and what we've been through. But you have to give yourself time. And I can speak personally about my own personal experiences. When I started to share about things I felt a lot of shame and embarrassment about, I realized it wasn't that big of a deal. I realized that I was holding my own self captive. It was like I was chaining myself to my past. And so I just cannot encourage you enough to carefully pick people to talk to about it, probably a therapist first, and know that it will get better and that feeling will go away. Okay? Moving on to question number 5. This question says, "Hi, Kati. I've been in treatment for multiple diagnoses since I was 14, and now I'm 28. These days, I'm totally disabled and cannot work or go to school. Trust me, I tried many times over and with all the accommodations. After 8 or 9 years of therapy, I was labeled resistant, severe, complex, and later I did some DBT, willful. I tried many methods, therapists, medications, and even TMS. TMS stands for transcranial magnetic stimulation. I'm not trying to be like this. There are feelings and beliefs in the way of practicing the skills that I learn or believing in the treatment itself. For example, I feel like therapy is just brainwashing, and I don't want to do any of it unless it feels right and authentic. It all feels wrong, even though it helps my moods and thoughts. It just feels inauthentic and plastic, like Band-Aids over bullet wounds. And even though I've been trying to address my traumas, the treatment itself might as well be another trauma with how badly I've internalized all of the quote unquote failures. And on the surface, it does look like I'm simply refusing to do the things I agree to. Have you ever had clients like me? Difficult ones? What the heck do I do? I'm so tired." My answer is going to come as a shock, but we need to be a little more particular about the therapists that we pick, because yes, I've had tons of difficult clients and I have tons of people in our community who feel like they are this person. And I also want to let you know that feeling like therapy is brainwashing or that it's in some way going to be used to control you is incredibly common. And a therapist that is worth their salt will be able to hang with you and slowly allow you to open up. And the trick with this is, it's interesting. Being a therapist is such an interesting, I love it so much. It's such an interesting job because when we have patients who, I wouldn't use the terms that you used, I would probably use resistant and scared. I think fear is driving this. So those would be the words I would probably use. I wouldn't say severe. I don't like the term severe. Some people might need it for validation, but I find it can be very judgmental. Also complex and saying difficult and a failure. The failures, that all sounds like those are bad terms. I would encourage you to not allow yourself to keep using them. But we could say resistant and scared. Now, when I have patients who are resistant or scared, a lot of my work is in trust building. It's in me being consistent. With these patients, for most of my patients, I do this, but the same time and day every week is very important. And I usually don't run very far behind if I do at all in my practice. I never did. I feel like that can be kind of triggering, especially because I deal with DBT, BPD patients, people with attachment wounds. So consistency is key. That's a big piece of how I build the trust. I also find that asking any kind of pointed questions can be very triggering. and make us feel very scared. And so instead of me talking a lot or me honestly offering any advice up front, I would probably just give you an opportunity to tell me what's going on. Tell me what your concerns are. Let's talk about this, this inauthenticity that you feel in therapy. Let's talk about this concern you have for like it being brainwashing. When did that start? Have you ever felt, I'd be really interested in that. Have you ever felt like somebody else was brainwashing you? Did you have anybody ever tell you that like gaslight you? The way that you remember that isn't correct. You're crazy. I'd be curious about that. Now, I'd have to be very cautious and slow with how I navigate it, but you're not difficult. You're an important person who has issues they want to work on, and we need to find you the right fit. And I know, again, that's kind of a shitty answer, but I want you to find a therapist. It might be someone who does more like psychoanalytic. Now, obviously, pure psychoanalysis does not, it exists still, but it's like not that helpful. But you need someone maybe with that kind of a background, because things like CBT can be very pointed and a little too direct. I think it might be triggering. I also think that someone who maybe does like more trauma-informed type of work, like a trauma specialist, that could be helpful. Yeah, someone who you feel at least slightly comfortable with. There's like this vibe of their office where you feel, it's almost like the same way we pick someone as a therapist in general because we want it to be a good fit. But in your case, after a couple of sessions, if we don't feel like attacked by them or that feel like they're brainwashing us, that's a good sign. If we feel like they're moving slowly with us and carefully, that's a great sign, because some patients want tough love. I'm that patient. I want my therapist to like call me out, but a lot of people don't, and we can't handle it, and it can feel overwhelming. And that's really what we're experiencing. You are not severe. You're not difficult. You're not complex. You're resistant because you're scared. And I think a big piece of your work might be figuring out what is so scary about therapy, and like worst case, best case, most likely case about it. Because I have a feeling we're always jumping to the worst case, and we believe that to be true. And so let's play it out and then maybe check some of our facts, because this reactivity you're experiencing is common, and we have to find a way to kind of manage it. And there could be things that we do to soothe our nervous system, like doing a full body shake, dunking our face in cold water, even grounding techniques like counting all the things in the room that are blue or black or brown. Those can all be helpful too. I just don't know how dysregulated you are, but I do know that you are triggered, and that means you're overstimulated. You're a little dysregulated at the very least. So those are just some of the things that I would encourage you to do. So just to sum this up, if we find ourselves feeling like we're the difficult patient in therapy, that we're resistant, that we're complex or severe, we want to be really cautious about who we pick as our therapist. We want them to feel at least slightly comfortable, and we want to not feel like they're asking pointed questions and triggering us all the time. Maybe someone who has a trauma background, someone who is warm and soft, okay? Also, we need to dig into our fear around this. What are we afraid is going to happen in therapy if we let someone in? Are there past experiences that come up even when I say that we think, oh, I think I'm afraid to let people in because when I did, they hurt me, for example. Those are really the ways that I think we're going to find some resolution and be reminded that we are not difficult, that we are in fact scared and resistant as a result of that. Okay? Hang in there. Now let's move on to question number 6. Question number 6 is our final question. It says, hi, Kati. You talk about inner child work a lot on your show. I do. I also have a workshop available at katiemorton.com about it. I can't say I always understand it, but recently I've been wondering if rather than giving support to your inner child, can it be therapeutic in the opposite direction? Great question. Can I receive love, kindness, and support from my inner child to help me find love, healing, and respect for myself? Some of the last times I remember being happy and at peace were as a toddler. And I wonder if toddler me can help adult me to find that emotional space again, where I can feel safe and held. Thank you for all of the care you show us all. I've learned so much from you between therapy sessions. And between therapy sessions, I found comfort in the information and advice you share. Of course, I'm so glad I could be there for you. Okay. Now, inner child work can look any kind of way we need it to. Yes, to answer your question, yes, younger you can offer support to older you. That's beautiful. The goal of inner child work isn't always necessarily to show love and affection to our younger self. It's to get back in touch with our younger self, because so often they never felt heard, they never felt supported, or maybe like in your case, we felt that early on and then we haven't since then. And so we need to tap back into that. We need to get that relationship going so that we can feel that again. We can remember true joy, true love, true relaxation. And so, yes, it can look like that. And I also want to throw out another thought, because I talk about this in my workshop. So if you are doing inner child work and you don't really know where to start, I have free videos available on YouTube. Just search Inner Child Work, Kati Morton, they will come up. But I also have a full 2-hour workshop available at katimorton.com in my shop. And in that, I talk about the importance of also recognizing that it's not always love that we have to offer. Sometimes we have to tantrum a little. Sometimes we can be really pissed or angry at our adult self or our child self. And it's okay to express that too. The reason inner child work is so helpful and so healing is because it allows not only for that connection to be made, which we've often usually disconnected out of like self-preservation, but it also allows us to feel the things that we didn't allow ourselves to at one time or another. And so that experience, that allowing for the emotions of teen us or child us or adult us to finally feel real and to be seen and heard and felt can be so incredibly validating. And then some of the things that we didn't get from our parents, or maybe even as we got older, we didn't feel like we had support from our spouse or our friends. Those are things that we can offer to ourselves now through that connection. Now that, again, it can go either way. It can be angry, we can be happy, we can be offering love, we can be like tantruming out. All of that is valuable in what I would call the rebuilding of this relationship between younger us and adult us. It doesn't matter which one's suffering or which one's doing well, or maybe they're neither are doing well. It's in us. Essentially, inner child work allows us to get to know ourselves better and accept us for who we are. And that's the magic in it. That's why it will look all kinds of ways, because we all know life is complicated. We have a lot of feelings we probably have never expressed or identified in ourselves, or even allowed for them, the space for them to be felt. And in inner child work, we can make the time and space to do that. Okay? Thank you all so much for asking your questions. Feel free, if your question still hasn't gotten answered and you're feeling frustrated, keep asking. It's okay. I get through as many of them as I can. And if you have other questions you want answered, you can go to my Patreon page. You can join my YouTube memberships for just a month or something like that and get your question answered that way. But have a wonderful, wonderful week. Take care of yourselves. Do your homework, and I'll see you next time. Bye.